You? My gladiator? She scoffed, then watched him tear through a monstrous army. The thunderous uproar of the alien spectators crashed over Jace, making the floor of the immense Colosseum tremble beneath his scuffed boots. The noise was a wild medley, guttural chants, metallic screeches, and the eerie scraping of armored limbs, all focused on the chaos below. Jace found himself surrounded by a bizarre assembly, towering, tusked brutes, whose breath steamed in the cold air. Sinuous beings with glassy scales that refracted the harsh arena lights in rainbow fragments, and clicking insectoids with blade-like appendages that shimmered with venom. The scent of foreign spices and burnt ozone hung heavy, coiling with the sweat and adrenaline that clung to every combatant's skin. His posture was tense but unyielding, a stubborn anchor amid the storm. He'd endured arenas and cages on half a dozen worlds, each with its own flavor of horror. This was just another gauntlet, another set of shackles to outwit. A resonant bell tolled, slicing through the cacophony and sending vibrations through Jace's chest. The arena seemed to pause for a heartbeat, as if all those alien eyes blinked in unison. Then the ground shifted beneath him, panels sliding apart with a hiss and a shudder. A shadowy pit yawned below, jagged mineral columns stabbing upward from the gloom like the bones of some ancient beast. Vapor curled along the ground, thick and shivering with the tang of ionized air, and somewhere beneath, swift predatory shapes flickered, only glimpses of claws and gleaming fangs in the mist. Jace braced himself. This wasn't about glory or the favor of the crowd. It was about staying alive, one moment at a time. He launched himself forward, boots gritting against the mineral floor, slipping into the haze before his rivals could react. Every motion was deliberate, sharp. He pressed his back against a mineral spire, breath steady despite the roaring in his ears. The first threat emerged with a hungry hiss, a serpentine beast, pale and limbless, fangs dripping with acid. Jace ducked beneath its lunge, driving his makeshift blade into the soft tissue beneath its jaw. The beast spasmed and fell silent. Another shape, a spined predator with eyes like burning coals, darted in, but Jace was faster. He rolled aside, seized a fallen spear, and with a grunt, impaled the thing through its thorax. Blood, thick and luminous, splattered his arms, painting his skin in alien war paint. Behind him, the crowd's noise faded to a distant hum, replaced by the beat of his heart and the rhythm of survival. He moved from column to column, dispatching slithering creatures with grim efficiency, watching his rivals falter, some falling to the beasts, others to their own fear. The mist became a canvas of violence and desperate hope, every second a brushstroke. From a high balcony above the carnage, a striking figure came into focus. A tall alien woman, her skin a deep, almost iridescent blue, sweeping horns arching from her brow and adorned with rings of amber. Her silver-white hair was intricately braided, laced with metallic charms that caught the arena's light. Glowing crimson eyes surveyed the chaos with piercing, almost predatory focus. Ceremonial scars traced her high cheeks, the lines delicate but unyielding, and her muscular frame was sheathed in ceremonial armor, plates worked in swirling alien patterns. Even through the haze and the violence, her gaze found Jace. He felt it, like a hook in his chest, holding him captive for a heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Her presence was a singularity amid the madness, and in that instant, Jace fought not just for his life, but against the sudden, inexplicable need to understand her. A final beast crashed from the shadows, jaws wide and shrieking. Jace met its charge head-on, rolling beneath its claws and driving his blade up into its heart. It collapsed atop him, heavy and twitching, but he forced his way free, bloodied but upright. The dust settled. All around, only a handful of fighters still stood, and of them, Jace was the only human. The Colosseum exploded in sound, a tide of alien triumph. From the speaker columns embedded in the arena walls, the announcer's voice slithered out, warped and many-tongued. The creature was scaled, many-eyed, and its words echoed in half a dozen languages. Survivor, the Earthborn, against all probability, victory. The crowd howled, some in delight, some in outrage. Later, back in his stark cell, Jace knelt over a basin cleaning his wounds. The water stung as it traced cuts and bruises, but he barely registered the pain. His thoughts circled back to the blue-skinned woman, the way she had looked at him. Not as prey, but as something unexpected. Something worth noticing. He watched the other survivors limp past, some boasting, some cursing. But even as the noise of the barracks swelled and faded, Jace's mind was elsewhere, replaying the glint of amber rings, the intelligence in those crimson eyes. Who was she? Why did her presence cut through the monotony and violence of his life, a shard of clarity in the endless blur of survival? The days that followed blurred together in a cycle of brutal training and restless sleep. The arena loomed above him, and the shackles on his wrists felt heavier than ever. But Jace watched. He studied the guards, the gates, the patterns of the other fighters. He planned and waited, every movement calculated, anything to gain an edge, a moment of opportunity. During a lull between training bouts, the air seemed to thicken, charged with something electric. Then she appeared, parting the crowd with her mere presence. Conversation dropped away, and every being within sight seemed to shrink from her path. She moved with grace, her blue skin glowing faintly beneath the arena lights, the metallic charms in her hair chiming softly. She stopped before him, eyes locked onto his, a challenge in her posture. Earthborn, she intoned, her voice smooth and resonant, each syllable rippling with power. You fight well enough. Her words were both a dismissal and a provocation. Jace straightened, meeting her gaze without flinching. I fight to live, that's all. A sly smile curled her lips. Living is only the beginning. What comes after? She stepped closer, the space between them charged. Her scent, sharp, floral, unlike anything he'd known, teased at his senses. Her hand hovered near his shoulder, not quite touching. The moment stretched. Dreams are for those who can afford them, he replied, voice low and steady. I want out. That's all. She laughed, the sound soft but intimate, brushing against the air between them. We shall see. She turned away, her presence leaving an ache in the space she'd occupied. Jace watched her go, unsettled. He realized she was a disruption, a spark that threatened to ignite something long buried inside him. In the silence that followed, he wondered what would come next, and for the first time in years it was not only survival that he craved. The next ordeal was a labyrinth, walls of shifting energy and solid stone, patrolled by armored alien sentinels. The air pulsed with electricity, each breath stinging Jace's lungs as he slipped through tight corridors, pressing himself against cold rock and humming force fields. He moved like a shadow, feet barely whispering against the ground, senses sharpened by adrenaline and necessity. In the twisting maze, every turn held promise or peril. His first encounter came quickly, a brute, twice his height, tusked and armored, lumbered into view. Jace slid behind a narrow archway, luring the creature forward. The brute wedged itself in the tight space, roaring with frustration. Jace sprang, using the wall for leverage, driving a stolen blade between the gaps in the brute's armor. The creature thrashed, but Jace was already gone, melting into the gloom before the sentinel's body hit the floor. He exploited every opportunity, using the shifting walls to his advantage, forcing larger foes into dead ends, using their bulk against them. Sometimes, he slipped past unseen, breath held as patrols of insectoid sentinels clattered by, their glowing eyes scanning for any sign of movement. He dispatched enemies with ruthless precision, a silent strike here, a thrown blade there, never lingering to watch the aftermath. The labyrinth demanded it. In one dim corridor, the air vibrated with a strange resonance, the shadows thicker, the silence deeper. A sudden shriek pierced the quiet, a sound unlike any other, sharp with fury and something almost melodic. Jace tensed, blade ready, and rounded a bend. There she was, the horned woman, Lysara, though he did not yet know her name, moved with lethal grace, her body a blur in the half-light. Her blade shimmered like quicksilver, flickering with every strike. She faced two armored opponents, each twice her mass, but she danced between them, horns flashing, feet gliding. Metal rang out as she parried a heavy blow, then spun low, slicing through one opponent's hamstring. The brute collapsed, and her blade flashed up, ending the threat in a single fluid movement. Their eyes met for a split second, a heartbeat frozen in the chaos. Not rivalry. Something else. Connection. Jace watched her vanish into the shadows, swift and silent, but her presence lingered, a ghostly imprint in his mind. His pulse raced, not just from the fight, but from the nearness of her. He could still feel the heat radiating from her skin, the intensity of her gaze. He pressed onward, mind sharpened by the memory of her movements. He was not alone in the maze. Others stalked these halls, some desperate, some skilled. But Jace moved with new purpose. Each encounter was briefer, his strikes more precise. He found himself anticipating the rhythm of the labyrinth, reading its shifting patterns as if guided by instinct, or perhaps by the echo of her presence. That night, in the cold isolation of his cell, Jace replayed the memory of her, every motion, every glance. Her involvement in the trial gnawed at him. She was too skilled, too poised to be merely another contestant. He watched for patterns, clues in the way the guards deferred to her, the way the other prisoners eyed her with a mix of fear and awe. She was an agent, he decided, perhaps a pawn of those who ran the games, or something more. His continued survival began to draw attention. The crowds grew louder, the overseers more watchful. The serpentine announcer, a creature with many eyes and a voice that slithered over the arena's speakers, targeted Jace, naming him before every match. The Earthborn, our anomaly. Will he endure or fall? The words marked him, made him a symbol. Rivals turned more desperate, attacks more cunning. The training ground became an echo chamber of tension, every conversation cut short when he entered, every glance a warning. Yet Lysara, her name whispered on the lips of the boldest, appeared more often. Sometimes she offered cryptic advice, a brief nod toward a weak spot in the arena, a silent gesture that saved him from a hidden trap. Other times, she stood so close he could feel the heat of her skin, the electricity in the air between them. One evening, as Jace cooled down after a brutal spar, she approached, moving with the ease of someone born to command. She leaned in, her voice a vibration just above a whisper, brushing the skin beneath his ear. "They're watching you, Earthborn. You're upsetting their calculations." He held her gaze, searching for mockery, but found only warning. "I know," he said quietly. She tilted her head, eyes narrowed. "Good. That means you have a chance." Her words settled over him like armor. Their encounters grew in number and intensity, sometimes an exchanged glance across the yard, sometimes a fleeting touch as she passed. Each moment was charged, a lifeline in the brutality. Jace found himself wanting to know her, not just for survival, but for the connection that flared between them in every brief encounter. The third trial arrived, a test of the mind. Jace stood in a chamber of mirrored glass and humming light. The air tasted metallic, charged with illusion. Visions swirled around him, fragments of old memories, twisted and cruel. He saw his home, his family, faces he had lost, all warped by alien cruelty. The walls rippled, trying to unmoor him from himself. He gritted his teeth, grounding himself in sensation, the roughness of his boots, the ache in his muscles, the cut on his lip. He ignored the visions, refusing to give them power. At the center of the maze, in a lucid interval, the illusions parted like fog. Lysara stood in a stark, windowless chamber, her guard lowered for the first time. She looked at him not as a rival, but as a fellow prisoner. She stepped closer, her voice softer, tinged with something he had never heard before, uncertainty. "They want to see you shatter," she admitted, her words barely more than a breath. "This is more than a contest." Jace's chest tightened. He fought the urge to reach for her, to anchor them both in something real. "What is it then?" he asked quietly. "What's the real game?" She hesitated, eyes searching his. For a moment, the woman of blades and armor seemed fragile. "The games are a filter," she said at last. "They're selecting the strong, the adaptable. For the Warden's Legion." He absorbed this, the pieces clicking into place. "A legion for what?" "I don't know," she admitted. "No one does. But you're their greatest find." Her eyes softened, the crimson glow dimming to a gentle ember. "If you escape, it could change everything, for all of us." Jace's hand hovered, uncertain, but her nearness was a comfort. The walls between them, alien, emotional, impossible, grew thinner. He saw the weight she bore, the hope and fear twined together. "You need me," he said, the realization settling like a stone. She nodded. "Not just for me, for everyone trapped here. If you run, I'll help you." Their bond deepened, no longer just attraction, but alliance. In that bleak chamber, with the illusions swirling at the edges, Jace and Lysara understood each other, not as captor and captive, not even as rivals, but as something new. The future was uncertain, the path ahead brutal. But in that moment, they were no longer alone. The days before the next trial were filled with coded glances and whispered words, tension thrumming in every breath Jace took. Lysara mapped escape routes for him, embedding directions in the casual way she leaned against a wall or swept her hand through the air. Every gesture carried hidden meaning. A flick of her wrist meant left at the junction. A tap against her hip signaled wait for my mark. In the shared spaces where eyes were everywhere, their conspiracy lived in the silence between words. At a communal meal, Lysara slid onto the bench beside Jace, her presence a rare comfort amid the cold din of alien voices and the clatter of metal trays. She spoke softly, her lips barely moving. "The next challenge, they'll throw everything at you. Don't attack the beast head-on. Find the flaw." Jace's gaze flicked to hers, searching for a hint of doubt. There was none. Only certainty, and the barest hint of fear for him. "I trust you," he said, his voice so low only she could hear. She nodded, the simple gesture a promise. When the day arrived, the arena was transformed. No longer a pit of stone and smoke, it became a shifting simulation. Walls shimmered with holographic projections, the ground pulsed beneath Jace's feet. The air was charged with anticipation. Every spectator hunched forward, their alien features twisted in excitement or bloodlust. The serpentine announcer, voice amplified and sibilant, drew out the moment with relish. "For your next entertainment, a true marvel of our craft, engineered for the impossible. Witness the apex predator." A panel slid open with a hiss. The creature emerged, a monstrous, hairless, wolf-like beast, twice Jace's height at the shoulder, with 6 muscular limbs and slick gray skin that glistened beneath the arena lights. Its milky eyes swept the crowd, then locked onto Jace. The beast moved with predatory intent, each step measured and unnatural, as if something else guided it from within. Jace circled warily, his boots scraping against the projection-mapped ground. The crowd's roars faded, replaced by the beast's rumbling growl. He remembered Lysara's warning. Don't attack head-on. Find the flaw. The monster lunged, claws tearing gouges in the floor. Jace dodged, rolling behind a jagged projection that flickered between stone and steel. He watched the beast's movements, noting the strange stutter in its gait, the momentary hesitations at each turn. It wasn't just hunting, it was following commands. Jace's mind raced. He spotted a faint glimmer behind the beast's head, a node, cables running from its spine into the arena walls. The creature was a puppet. The real threat was the node. He sprinted for higher ground, dodging another swipe of claws. He scaled a spire, his fingers scraping against its rough surface, the illusion flickering as he climbed. The beast snarled and leaped after him, jaws snapping inches from his boots. Jace drew a shard of metal from his belt and hurled it. The fragment struck the node, but only sparked harmlessly off its casing. He needed to lure the beast closer, expose the node fully. Jace shouted, waving his arms. "Come on, ugly! You want me? Earn it!" The beast roared, launching itself at the spire. Jace waited until the last possible moment, then leaped aside. The creature crashed into the projection, the node exposed for a heartbeat. Jace drove another shard directly into the glowing circuitry. The node exploded in a burst of sparks and ozone. The beast convulsed, limbs jerking wildly. Then it collapsed, lifeless, its strings cut. The arena erupted into chaos. Spectators screamed, guards scrambled, the air thick with confusion and panic. In the chaos, Lysara moved. She slipped a device from her belt, thumbed a switch, and hurled it into the arena's control bank. A pulse of blue-white energy rolled outward, shorting out lights, screens, and comms. The facility plunged into darkness, alarms shrieking in the void. Jace spun, searching for her. Lysara leaped over the arena wall, blade flashing in her hand. She landed beside him, eyes blazing. "Now!" she called, voice ringing through the confusion. They moved as one, cutting through the chaos. A deadly pair, perfectly attuned to each other's rhythm. Lysara's blade spun arcs of silver in the dark, felling a guard with a single precise stroke. Jace snatched up a fallen baton, driving it into a second guard's abdomen. Together they pressed forward, each anticipating the other's next move, covering blind spots, clearing a path. The crowd surged, some stampeding for the exits, others frozen in shock. Security mechs clattered into the arena, but Lysara hurled another pulse grenade, frying their circuits. Sparks rained down as they reached a hatch at the edge of the arena floor. Lysara knelt, fingers dancing over the access panel. "Cover me," she hissed. Jace turned, fists clenched, ready for anything. 2 more guards burst from the shadows, weapons drawn. He ducked the first swing, slamming the baton across the guard's face, then caught the second's wrist and twisted, sending the weapon clattering away. A quick jab to the ribs dropped the guard, and Jace turned back just as the hatch slid open. Lysara slipped inside, beckoning him. "Come." The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for 2. Metal scraped against metal as they crawled, bodies pressed close. Lysara's scent. Sharp, floral, electric, filling the confined space. Their shoulders brushed with every motion, each heartbeat a countdown. Danger and adrenaline mingled, sharpening every sense, every fleeting touch. Jace's breath mingled with hers, his voice a low whisper. "How much farther?" "Not far," Lysara replied, her tone clipped but warm. "Stay close." The shaft bent left, then up. Lysara took the lead, guiding him through a series of tight turns and hidden hatches, her hands steady on the metal. At last, they emerged in a narrow alcove high above the arena floor, the din of chaos now distant. They pressed forward, slipping through a security door into the warden's private sector. The air here was sterile and cold, reeking of antiseptic and authority. The corridors gleamed, edges too sharp, every surface reflecting the harsh overhead light. Reinforced doors lined the hall, each one a barrier between freedom and oblivion. From somewhere deep within, the faint echoing cries of the broken drifted, a chilling reminder of what waited for those who failed. Lysara paused at a junction, her expression grave. "We're close," she whispered. "No more games from here. The warden's office is beyond this hall. That's where they erase the survivors' memories, wipe them clean, start over. If we destroy the data, we cripple the whole operation." Jace nodded, jaw set. "Lead the way." They moved swiftly, avoiding patrols, ducking behind crates and columns. At the end of the corridor, Lysara produced a stolen passcode, pressing it to a console. The door slid open, revealing the central control room, a circular chamber alive with blinking consoles and holographic displays. At its heart stood a massive data hub, cables snaking out like tentacles into the facility's nervous system. "This is it," Lysara said, her voice tight with urgency. "The core of everything. All their records, controls, protocols. Destroy this, and the game's end. For now at least." Jace looked around, noting the room's defenses, security turrets, automated drones idling near the ceiling. "How do we take it down?" Lysara knelt at the core's access panel, fingers flying over the keys. "I can overload the system, but it will take time." Alarms blared, louder now, echoing through the sterile halls. Jace tensed, peering out the narrow viewport as the heavy footfalls of the warden's elite guards approached. "They're coming," he warned. Lysara's hands didn't falter. "This is our only chance. Buy me 60 seconds." Jace squared his shoulders, planting himself in the doorway. The weight of every fight, every loss, pressed down on him. But beside Lysara, he felt something new. Hope. Fierce and wild. Behind him, Lysara worked, her voice steady. "Hold the line, Earthborn. I'm almost there." And as the shadows of the elite lengthened down the corridor, Jace readied himself for the final stand, knowing that whatever happened next, he and Lysara would face it together. The lock disengaged, revealing a dark corridor ahead, narrow, cold, the air thick with the promise of violence. Jace and Lysara hesitated only a heartbeat before plunging forward, senses straining for any sign of movement. They had barely taken 10 steps when shadows detached from the walls. The warden's elite. The elites were nothing like the guards from the arena. These were nightmares given form, genetically sculpted for one purpose. They moved with predatory grace, skin marked by bioluminescent patterns, eyes burning with inhuman focus. Jace saw the glint of talons, the shimmer of subdermal armor. There was no time for fear. Jace surged forward, blade clenched in his fist. The first elite lunged, a blur of silver and black. Jace ducked under a swipe, pivoting to slash at the exposed side. Sparks flew as his blade scraped armor, but the elite twisted away, impossibly fast. Another came from his blind side, but Lysara was there, a streak of blue and silver. Her blade flashed, catching the elite across the throat. A spray of dark blood arced through the air. Back to back, they moved as a single unit. Every step, every swing was coordinated, wordless. Jace blocked a heavy blow aimed for Lysara's back. She spun low, tripping another elite, her horns sweeping dangerously close to Jace's cheek. The corridor rang with the clash of metal, the hiss of pain, the guttural language of their enemies. A third elite fainted, slashing with hooked blades. Jace's muscles burned, lungs aching, but adrenaline kept him sharp. He met the attack, blade to blade, then drove his elbow into the elite's jaw. The creature staggered but did not fall. Lysara pressed the advantage, her sword slipping beneath its ribs, ending it in a single efficient motion. The corridor narrowed, their enemies relentless. Jace felt every old injury, every scar, but he refused to slow. Left! Lysara called, and he pivoted, intercepting a charging elite with a brutal kick. She covered his flank, spinning and slicing with liquid grace. Keep moving, Lysara urged, breathless but determined. They fought like cornered animals, each drawing strength from the other. Jace lost count of the strikes he parried, the close calls that left fresh cuts along his arms and neck. He caught glimpses of Lysara's face, wild and fierce, her eyes burning with purpose. Blood, sweat, and sparks painted the air. Finally, the corridor opened onto the final door, a heavy, reinforced barrier with a glowing interface. Lysara darted to the panel, fingers flying over the controls. Jace turned, holding off the last two elites, buying her precious seconds. His arm trembled from the effort, but he did not yield. Almost there, Lysara called, voice taut with urgency. The door shuddered, lights flickering. Then, with a hiss, it slid open. But before they could slip through, a towering figure blocked their path. The announcer, no longer the distant sardonic voice of the games, but a living wall of scales and muscle. He stood over 2 meters tall, his reptilian features twisted with disdain. In his hands, an energy staff crackled, arcs of blue lightning leaping between its tips. "You will not leave," he hissed, voice layered with static and menace. Jace shoved Lysara through the opening. "Go, finish it!" He turned to face the announcer alone, steeling himself for the fight he'd been dreading since the first day. The announcer wasted no time, staff sweeping in a deadly arc. Jace ducked, feeling the heat of the energy blade pass within inches of his scalp. He countered, slashing with his battered blade, but the announcer blocked effortlessly. The staff slammed into Jace's side, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he forced himself upright, refusing to surrender. The announcer pressed his advantage, every strike precise, merciless. Sparks rained down as the staff slammed against the corridor's metal walls, carving deep scars. Jace gritted his teeth, enduring blow after blow, searching for any weakness. A flicker of arrogance, a missed beat in the rhythm. The announcer's eyes glowed with satisfaction, certain of victory. A sudden flare of crimson light sliced through the gloom. From the open door, Lysara appeared, transformed. Her horns glowed with inner fire, casting rippling shadows. Her eyes burned, twin orbs of molten energy. Every line of her body radiated power, an ancient force awakened by desperation and love. She moved with impossible speed, a blur of blue and silver. Her blade met the announcer's staff, sparks igniting in their wake. The announcer reeled, unprepared for her fury. Lysara's horns crackled with energy as she swept past, blade arcing in a deadly crescent. "Jace!" she cried, her voice ringing with power. "Now!" Jace surged to his feet, pain forgotten. As the announcer turned, Lysara drove her blade straight through his chest. The reptilian giant convulsed, mouth open in a final wordless howl. The staff clattered to the floor, its energy flickering out. With a shudder, the announcer crumpled. His reign of terror ended in a flash of light. Lysara rushed to Jace, dropping her blade. Her hands were gentle on his bruised face, her touch a balm after the brutality. "Are you hurt?" she asked, voice trembling with concern. Her fingers lingered along his jaw, tracing the new bruises. Jace tried to catch his breath, overwhelmed by the warmth in her gaze. "I'll live," he managed, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "You saved me." She smiled back, fierce and soft at once. "We save each other," she whispered, her forehead resting briefly against his. For a moment the world shrank to just the two of them, the chaos receding, replaced by something profound and unspoken. But alarms blared, reminding them the fight was not yet over. Lysara took his hand, leading him through the final door into the core, a chamber alive with pulsing light and trembling with the threat of imminent collapse. The central data hub loomed before them, cables sparking, displays flickering with desperate error messages. Lysara moved to the console, disabling security with swift, practiced keystrokes. "Help me," she said. Jace braced the door, then hurried to her side, his hand steady on the controls. Together they initiated the data purge, code cascading down the screen in a torrent. Outside, the roar of explosions shook the floor, lights dying one by one. "Almost there," Lysara breathed, her fingers dancing over the interface. The data hub began to overheat, conduits glowing red-hot. Alarms rose to a fever pitch, warning of imminent detonation. Lysara turned to Jace, her eyes shining with relief, sweat streaking her brow. "It's done. We're free." The rush of battle faded, replaced by triumph and something deeper, more enduring. In the flickering light, Jace saw not just a fellow survivor, but a partner. Lysara's hand found his, squeezing tight as the world around them began to fall apart, but they stood together, unbroken, undefeated, and finally, free. The facility was chaos. Explosions shuddered through the halls, power flickered in frantic pulses, and alarms howled overhead in a rising, desperate wail. Smoke curled along the ceiling, painting shifting shadows that danced with the emergency lights. Lysara's hands moved with precise urgency at the main console, her fingers flying across alien glyphs as she completed the purge. The data hub trembled, its core melting down as she sent waves of liberation through the system. Screens across the complex erupted into static, then flickered with new messages. Doors unlocked, restraints disengaged. The warden's prisoners, beings of every shape and color, broken but unbowed, stumbled into the ruined corridors, blinking in sudden freedom. Lysara watched the system's final lines of code spill across the display. She pressed the last command, her breath catching as the records released into the void. There would be no more games, no more erasures. She turned from the terminal, chest heaving with exhaustion and relief. The world burned around her, but as she searched for Jace, her focus narrowed to a single point, the place where he waited, battered and bloodied, but alive. In that moment, the chaos became irrelevant. The alarms, the tremors, the shouts of the freed, all faded to the edge of her awareness. There was only Jace, and the new gravity that bound them together. Jace reached for her, his hands trembling from adrenaline and pain. He cupped her face, thumbs tracing the ceremonial scars along her cheekbones. Her skin was warm and slick with sweat, trembling beneath his touch. He saw the vulnerability in her crimson eyes, the storm of emotion that raged just beneath the surface. All the walls she'd built, all the power she'd wielded, they slipped away as she met his gaze. "We're free," he whispered, the word thick with disbelief and hope. It felt too fragile to speak aloud, but he needed her to hear it, to anchor both of them in the new reality. Lysara leaned into his palm, her breath shaky. The hardness in her posture melted as she pressed closer, her horns grazing his cheek, the rings cool against his skin. For a heartbeat, they stood suspended in the wreckage, everything else falling away. Jace brushed his lips against her forehead, then her mouth, tentative at first, then hungry. Lysara's arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him in. The kiss deepened, fierce and gentle, a collision of need and promise. The world around them trembled, but within their embrace, there was only stillness. When they finally parted, Lysara's eyes were wet, her voice raw. "I never thought I'd find this," she breathed, the admission a secret trembling in the air between them. "Not here. Not with anyone." Jace pressed his forehead to hers, grounding them both in the reality of escape. "We have each other now," he said, conviction threading through his exhaustion. "We can face anything." For a moment they lingered in the ruined core, holding each other as if nothing else mattered. The alarms faded into the background. Even the ground's shuddering seemed distant, as if the world itself paused to witness their defiance. But the chaos pressed back in, insistent and urgent. The floor shook with a new detonation somewhere nearby. Lysara pulled away just enough to search his face, concern tightening her features. "We have to move. The prisoners. Some won't survive if the structure collapses. We need to get them out." Jace nodded, determination flaring. "Lead the way. I'll cover you." They slipped from the control room, Lysara's hand finding his as they navigated the devastated corridors. The halls were thick with smoke and the stench of burning circuitry. Freed prisoners stumbled in confusion, some clutching wounds, others helping their fellows. Lysara barked orders in the harsh tongue of the wardens, her voice cutting through panic. Jace added his own, herding stragglers toward the nearest exits. A small, spindly alien with fractured chitin clung to Jace's sleeve, eyes wide with fear. He knelt, voice gentle. "This way. Stay close." Lysara scooped up a young, frightened prisoner, tucking her beneath one arm as they pressed on. The growing band of escapees followed, moving as a desperate ragtag unit. Explosions rattled the walls, sending showers of sparks and fragments raining down. Jace shielded Lysara with his body as a ceiling panel crashed nearby. She pressed closer to him, urgency in her touch. "Almost there," she breathed, the words an anchor as they pushed forward. At every turn, they found more survivors, some strong enough to run, others barely able to stagger. Jace and Lysara guided them, their hands never far apart. The unspoken connection between them became the glue that held the group together, hope spreading in their wake. They reached a service corridor where the outer wall had cracked open, the night beyond beckoning with cool, clean air. The sounds of chaos faded, replaced by the hush of open space. Lysara squeezed Jace's hand. "This way." They slipped through the breach, emerging into the darkness outside. Stars scattered across the sky, brighter and sharper than Jace had ever seen through the prison's smog and artificial lights. For a long moment he simply stared upward, awed by the immensity of the universe now open to them. Lysara joined him, her hand sliding into his, fingers entwined. The gesture was simple, but it held the weight of everything they'd endured. Every betrayal, every loss, every hard-won victory. She leaned against him, her breath warm on his neck, and for the first time, Jace let himself hope for more than survival. Around them, the freed prisoners began to scatter, some finding new courage, others weeping with relief. Lysara turned to him, voice soft but steady. "What now, Earthborn?" Jace squeezed her hand, a crooked smile breaking through his exhaustion. "We keep moving. Together." She smiled back, fierce and beautiful, her horns glowing faintly in the starlight. "I'd like that." They began to walk, steps in perfect rhythm, moving into the unknown with only each other to trust, their bodies brushed with every stride, shoulders, hands, hips, each touch a reminder that they were no longer alone. The facility behind them burned, but before them stretched possibility, freedom, and a future neither of them had dared imagine. Jace glanced at Lysara, the woman who had been his adversary, his guide, his salvation. "Whatever comes next, we face it as one," he promised. Lysara's answer was a lingering kiss, both fierce and gentle, sealing the promise between them. Together, they disappeared into the night, fugitives and partners, bound by the crucible they'd survived, and by the love that had grown in its flames. Dawn crested over the shattered facility, the first light of freedom gilding the alien landscape in hues of gold and violet. Jace and Lysara moved quietly through the battered outer grounds, footsteps muffled by scorched grass and scattered debris. Above them, the sky was vast and sharp, the air crisp, each breath tinged with ozone, smoke, and the promise of something wholly new. Every muscle in Jace's body ached from battle and exhaustion, but exhilaration crackled in his veins. Each glance he stole at Lysara was met by a spark in her crimson eyes, a silent affirmation that they had made it, together. They paused atop a ragged ridge, the world sloping down toward the ruins behind them. The facility was a smoking skeleton now, walls crumbled and towers half collapsed, still echoing with the memory of screams and violence. Yet, in the dawn, it looked smaller, dwarfed by the wild alien landscape stretching in every direction. Lysara's hand found Jace's, their fingers intertwining with a quiet finality. Neither spoke, but the meaning in that touch was clear. They would never be prisoners again. Jace let his gaze drift over the horizon, the unfamiliar constellation still lingering in the brightening sky. "We really did it," he said softly, more to himself than to her. Lysara's lips curved in a weary, radiant smile. "We did," she replied. Her voice was roughened by fatigue and emotion. "No one ever escapes the games. They'll write songs about this on 100 worlds." Jace chuckled, the sound unfamiliar in his throat after so many days of tension. "I'd settle for a hot meal and somewhere to sleep that isn't a cell." She squeezed his hand, the calloused skin grounding him. "We'll find both," she promised. "But first, we need to put distance between us and whatever's left of their patrols." With a last look at the ruins, they turned and began the slow descent from the ridge, slipping into the wild terrain beyond the arena's shadow. The land was alien, but alive. Ferns glowed with bioluminescence beneath the trees. Strange birds shrieked from hidden perches, and the ground was thick with tangled roots. Jace moved carefully, every step a reminder that this world was not his own. But Lysara was at his side, navigating confidently, pointing out safe paths and warning him away from the slick, venomous moss that clung to some stones. As the sun rose, burning off the mist, their conversation grew more relaxed, the tension of constant escape easing as the landscape swallowed the remnants of the Warden's domain. They shared stories in quiet moments, voices hushed and intimate as if speaking secrets to the wind. Jace told her of Earth, of blue skies and rain, of laughter that echoed through alleys and the taste of coffee at dawn. He spoke of lost hopes, parents gone, friends vanished into the void, and the old wounds that had driven him across the stars, searching for meaning in the emptiness. Lysara listened without judgment, her eyes softening as she heard the ache behind his words. In turn, Lysara shared pieces of her own burden. She told him of her people's captivity, the generations spent as pawns in the Warden's games. She admitted the guilt she bore as a reluctant enforcer, her strength twisted into a weapon against those she'd once hoped to protect. "I thought if I became indispensable, I could buy them mercy," she confessed, voice thick with regret. "But the only thing I earned was more chains." Jace shook his head, reaching out to brush his fingers over her wrist. "You saved them. You saved me. That's what matters now." She looked at him, something unspoken passing between them, something fierce and unbreakable. Each confession, each truth shared, was a brick in the foundation of their new partnership. By midday, the sun was high, painting the alien forest in sharp contrasts of shadow and light. They found a sheltered glade, tucked away beneath a canopy of iridescent leaves. The air was still and sweet, a rare sanctuary from the chaos behind them. Jace slumped to the ground, exhaustion finally catching up, but Lysara remained standing, studying him with a searching gaze. "You could leave," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are traders, ships. With your skills, you could start over anywhere in the galaxy." She looked away, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "You don't owe me anything." Jace frowned, reaching up to catch her hand. He drew her down beside him, pulling her close until their bodies touched, heart to heart. "Not without you," he murmured. "We began this together. I'm not walking away now." She smiled then, truly smiled, radiant and unguarded. The hardness she'd worn like armor slipped away, revealing the woman beneath. Strong, wounded, beautiful beyond words. Then together. Always. She breathed. Jace brushed a lock of silver-white hair from her face, awe in his touch. The line of her horns, the curve of her jaw, the light in her eyes. He traced them all with trembling fingers, memorizing every detail. "I still can't believe you're real," he admitted, voice thick. Lysara leaned into his palm, her eyes shining. "I am. And I'm yours, if you'll have me." He answered her with a kiss, slow and lingering, a celebration of survival and hope, of futures reclaimed from the ashes. Their lips met with the urgency of new beginnings and the gentleness of healing, a promise forged in fire. When they parted, Lysara pressed her forehead to his, her breath mingling with his. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, her voice trembling with certainty, "we face it together." Jace nodded, the truth of it settling deep in his bones. "Together," he echoed. They lingered in the glade, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the sunlight warm away the last of the cold from their captivity. For the first time, Jace felt something more than survival, a hunger for the future, for a life beyond pain and flight. Lysara's arms tightened around him, her touch grounding, steady. Eventually, they rose and continued on, hand in hand, their fingers entwined, a gesture of trust and new beginnings. They moved through the alien world not as fugitives, but as partners, equals bound by all they had endured and all they now dared to dream. Behind them, the galaxy would feel the ripple of their defiance. Stories would spread, whispered in the shadows of 100 worlds, of a human and a horned warrior who broke the warden's chains and vanished into freedom. Ahead, the uncertain promise of a future they would build together stretched out beneath the open sky. As they walked, Jace glanced at Lysara, the woman who had been his rival, his ally, his love. She caught his gaze, her smile lighting up the wild landscape, and in that moment, he knew, finally and completely, that he was not alone. Their journey was only beginning, and together, they would challenge whatever fate the stars held. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.